3 days. That's all it took for the WNBA owners to crush whatever hope the players had left. The Players Union spent weeks crafting what they called a realistic compromise. They lowered their salary cap demand from $10 million down to $9 million. They restructured their revenue share proposal to climb gradually from 25% to 27.5% over the life of the deal. They presented it on Tuesday, February 17th, genuinely believing they'd made a good faith effort to meet ownership halfway. By Friday night, they had their answer. And it wasn't the answer they wanted. The owners fired back with a counter-proposal that moved on exactly 2 things: slightly better housing and a modest bump to the 401k plan. Everything else? Unchanged. The salary cap stayed at $5.65 million. Revenue share stayed at 15%. The 2 biggest issues the players cared about didn't budge an inch. This isn't negotiation anymore. This is the owners drawing a line in the sand and daring the players to cross it. And with the season start just weeks away, someone's about to blink. The question is who? Let's break down exactly what happened here, because the gap between what the players wanted and what they got back is staggering. The Players Union submitted their revised proposal asking for a $9 million salary cap. Not crazy money by professional sports standards, but a significant jump from the current structure. They also wanted a 25% revenue share that would grow to 27.5% as the league expanded. In their minds, this was reasonable. The league just signed a $2.2 billion media rights deal. Attendance and ratings hit record highs last season. The momentum is real, and the players wanted compensation that reflected that growth. The owners looked at those numbers and said no. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Not maybe. Not let's discuss this further. Just no. Their counterproposal came back with the salary cap locked at $5.65 million. Same number they proposed 6 weeks ago. Revenue share stayed at 15%. Same number they proposed 6 weeks ago. The only movement came in areas the players didn't even prioritize. Housing got marginally better, with 1-bedroom apartments for veterans and rookies through 2028. Then studios for everyone after that. The 401k contribution increased from $3,000 per year of service to $4,500. Mental health reimbursements got a small boost. That's it. That's the big compromise. The owners essentially said, here's some nice to haves, but on the money issues, on the things that actually matter to your bank accounts, we're not moving. And the speed of the response tells you everything. When the players sent their first proposal months ago, the league waited 6 weeks to respond. 6 weeks of radio silence that drove the union absolutely crazy. This time, 3 days. That's not because the owners needed time to carefully consider the player demands. That's because they'd already made their decision before the proposal even landed on their desks. They knew exactly what they were going to say, and they said it fast to make a point. The point is simple. Stop wasting our time with these numbers. We've given you our final offer on salary cap and revenue share, and nothing you send us is going to change that. To understand why the owners are holding this line so firmly, you need to understand who actually owns the WNBA. This isn't some feel-good cooperative run by people who just love women's basketball. 42% of the league is controlled by the 30 NBA team owners. Another 42% is controlled by individual WNBA team owners. The remaining 16% belongs to an outside group of investors who came in during a $75 million capital raise back in 2022. That NBA ownership stake is the key to understanding everything happening right now. These aren't basketball romantics. These are businessmen who built billion-dollar franchises by making hard financial decisions, sometimes ruthless ones. When they look at a proposal asking for a $9 million salary cap and 25% revenue share, they're not thinking about fairness or what the players deserve. They're thinking about spreadsheets. They're thinking about profit and loss statements. And those spreadsheets are telling them that accepting the players' proposal would result in what the league officially called hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. That's not exaggeration. That's their actual projection based on current revenue streams and projected growth. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. The WNBA has never turned a profit. Not once in its 28-year history. It's been subsidized by the NBA since day one. The NBA owners have been funding this league as a combination of investment in women's sports and long-term growth play. They've accepted losses for nearly 3 decades because they believe the league would eventually become financially sustainable. That $2.2 billion media rights deal starting in 2026 is supposed to be the turning point. It's supposed to be the moment when the WNBA finally stands on its own feet financially. But the owners aren't willing to bet everything on that projection. They're looking at the players' demands and seeing a scenario where even with that massive media deal, the league still operates deep in the red for years. They're protecting themselves against the possibility that the projected growth doesn't materialize, that ratings don't hold, that the Caitlin Clark bump was a one-year spike and not a permanent shift. From their perspective, giving the players what they want now would be gambling the future of the entire league on optimistic projections. Let's talk about what the owners are actually offering, because if you just read headlines, you'd think they're trying to exploit the players. That's not what's happening. The current proposal on the table quadruples player salaries compared to the old CBA. Read that again. Quadruples. The average WNBA salary would jump from around $64,000 to over $250,000. The minimum salary increases dramatically. Every player gets housing, either one-bedroom apartments for veterans or studios for developmental players. There's a 401k plan with recognition payments for players with 8 or more years of service. Mental health reimbursements are included. Developmental roster spots are being added to some teams. Pregnant players get protection from trades, something players have been asking for years. Retirement benefits are funded. This isn't charity, but it's not exploitation either. By any objective measure, this represents a massive step forward for WNBA player compensation and working conditions. Most labor negotiations in any industry would consider this a major victory. Union members in other fields would be thrilled to quadruple their salaries and add this many new benefits. But it's not enough for the WNBA players. They want more. Specifically, they want 70% more on the salary cap and 67% more on revenue share. And here's where the disconnect happens. The players look at that $2.2 billion media deal and think, we're the product, we're the reason that money exists, we deserve a much bigger cut. They're not wrong about being the product. Without players, there's no league. But the owners are looking at the same situation and thinking we've been subsidizing this league for 28 years. We're the ones who kept it alive when it wasn't profitable. And now that it might finally turn a corner, you want us to give away so much revenue that we're still losing hundreds of millions? Both perspectives make sense from where each side is standing. The players see their value finally being recognized by the market and want compensation that reflects it. The owners see decades of investment that hasn't paid off and want to protect themselves before handing over bigger chunks of revenue. The problem is these two perspectives are fundamentally incompatible. One side has to give, and the owners are making it very clear it's not going to be them. Here's where the players' strategy falls apart. They're treating this like a traditional labor negotiation where both sides have roughly equal leverage. But the WNBA isn't a traditional sports league, and the leverage situation is nowhere near equal. In most pro sports labor disputes, players can threaten to strike and ownership genuinely panics because a lost season means lost billions in revenue. The NFL, NBA, MLB, those leagues print money. Missing games costs everyone massive amounts of cash, which creates pressure on both sides to compromise. The WNBA doesn't work that way. If the players strike and the season gets delayed or canceled, yes, the owners lose money, but they're already losing money. The league operates at a loss. A canceled season means the owners don't have to pay salaries, don't have to fund operations, don't have to cover travel and housing costs. They lose the revenue, but they also cut all the expenses. For a league that's not profitable, that math isn't nearly as painful as it would be for the NBA. The players, on the other hand, lose everything. No games means no paychecks. For most WNBA players, that's their primary income. They can't afford to sit out a season the way NBA players could during their lockout. There's also the timing problem. The WNBA just had its best season ever in terms of ratings and attendance, driven largely by the Caitlin Clark effect. Rookie viewership exploded. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Casual fans started paying attention. That momentum is real, but it's also fragile. A strike right now could absolutely kill it. Fans who just started watching might tune out and never come back. The media narrative would shift from women's basketball is finally breaking through to greedy players destroyed their own league. That's not fair, but that's how it would play in the press. The players also have another leverage problem: financial transparency. The WNBA has repeatedly refused to disclose how revenue is distributed between the ownership buckets. They won't reveal profit margins or detailed financial breakdowns. When journalists ask about the money flow, the league's position is simple: that's none of your business. And legally, they're right. It's a privately held league. They don't have to open their books. But that means the players are negotiating blind. They don't actually know if the owners are crying poor while secretly making money, or if the losses are as real as the league claims. Everything in this negotiation keeps coming back to that media rights deal. $2.2 billion over 11 years, starting in 2026. It's the biggest deal in WNBA history by an enormous margin. The current deal pays the league about $50 million per year. The new deal averages $200 million annually. That's a 400% increase. It's the kind of money that changes everything about how the league operates. And both sides are looking at that number and seeing completely different things. The players see validation. They see proof that their product has real market value, that networks are willing to pay serious money to broadcast WNBA games, that the league is finally being recognized as legitimate professional sports entertainment. When you're looking at a $200 million annual media deal, asking for a $9 million salary cap and 25% revenue share doesn't seem unreasonable. In fact, it seems conservative compared to what players in other leagues get. The players are thinking if networks are willing to pay this much, clearly we're worth more than what the owners are offering. The owners see something completely different. They see risk. That media deal is based on projections of continued growth. It's based on the assumption that the Caitlin Clark effect wasn't a one-year fluke, that ratings will hold or increase, that fan interest will continue building. But what if it doesn't? What if next season's ratings drop back to pre-Clark levels? What if the casual fans who tuned in for the rookie sensation don't stick around? The owners are looking at that media deal and thinking, we need to structure player compensation in a way that protects us if this projected growth doesn't materialize. There's also the revenue distribution question. That $2.2 billion sounds massive, but it gets split many ways. The league office takes a cut. Each team gets a share. There are operating costs, marketing expenses, facility costs, travel, housing, all the infrastructure that makes professional basketball possible. The players see $2.2 billion and think there's plenty of money to give us what we're asking for. The owners see that same number and think after we cover all our costs and account for the losses we've absorbed for 28 years, there's not as much left as you think. Without full financial transparency, there's no way to know who's right. The Players Union now faces a decision that will define the future of the WNBA for the next decade. They can accept that the owners aren't moving on salary cap or revenue share and focus on negotiating everything else. There's still plenty on the table. Season start date, number of games, the core designation system that lets teams retain players, length of rookie contracts, salary protection limits, exceptions to the prioritization rule that prevents players from playing overseas during the WNBA season. All of that could be negotiated to improve working conditions without breaking the league's financial model. Or they can dig in. They can insist on their $9 million cap and 25% revenue share. They can refuse to negotiate seriously until the owners move on those numbers. They can threaten to strike, create public pressure, paint the owners as greedy billionaires who won't share the wealth despite that massive media deal. They can try to turn this into a public relations war and hope fan pressure forces ownership to cave. That's a legitimate strategy in labor negotiations. Sometimes you have to be willing to fight. But here's the reality check. The owners are betting the players won't actually go through with it. They're betting the players won't risk throwing away quadrupled salaries and significantly improved benefits because they can't get the exact revenue split they want. They're betting the players won't risk killing the momentum from the best season in league history. They're betting the players will eventually look at the deal on the table, realize it's genuinely good even if it's not everything they wanted, and sign it. The league has made their timeline clear. The season is supposed to start May 8th. Before that can happen, they need to conduct an expansion draft for the new Golden State team, hold free agency so teams can build their rosters, and run the collegiate draft. All of that requires a CBA in place. Every day that passes without an agreement makes it more likely the season gets delayed. And a delayed season means lost revenue, canceled games, angry fans, and destroyed momentum. The pressure is building, and it's building much faster on the players than on the owners. The clock is ticking. Someone has to make a move. And based on this latest proposal, the owners have made it very clear that move isn't coming from them. This is a game of chicken, and the owners are driving a much bigger truck. They've made their position crystal clear. The offer on salary cap and revenue share is final. The players can negotiate everything else, but those two numbers aren't moving. Now the Players Union has to decide if they're willing to accept reality or if they're prepared to push this to the breaking point. The deal on the table is genuinely strong by WNBA historical standards. Quadrupled salaries, housing, retirement benefits, protections that players have wanted for years. It's not everything they asked for, but it's real progress. The question is whether that's enough, or if the players are willing to gamble everything for more. Because make no mistake, if this turns into a strike, the players have far more to lose. The owners can survive a canceled season. Most players can't. The momentum from last season could evaporate overnight. The Caitlin Clark effect could fade before it ever really takes hold. The next move belongs to the players, and whatever they decide will shape the WNBA for the next decade. Time's running out. May 8th is coming fast, and somebody's got to blink. Stay locked in with my channel. Simply Explained, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.